Welcome to the JetLife podcast, pulling back the curtain on private aviation so you can live that jet life to the fullest. My name's Tom Lelyo, and I'm your ultimate jet guide. Hello and welcome to the JetLife podcast. And today I'm super excited to be joined with Jason Zilberbrand. How you doing, Jason?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
I'm so excited to have Mr. VREF here himself. So Jason is actually the president of VREF, Aircraft Value Reference and Appraisal Services. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you. This is, I'm very excited. This will be a lot of fun.
Tell me maybe from the start, like, how'd you get into aircraft appraisals?
You know, I was born into a family that was very entrepreneurial. So my dad started an aviation insurance company when I was in high school, which is JSSI. And so I went to go work for them when I was basically, I was 21. And so I was like there from literally the jump.
I did not realize that was your pedigree. I mean, you're Mr. VREF and then you're son of Mr. JSSI.
Yeah, so that's how it all started. You know, in the early 90s, if somebody didn't walk you through the proper way to sell an airplane and all the steps in between, you certainly weren't going to Google it. You weren't going to be able to, type it into a computer and have it spit out the answers, and nobody was going to give it to you. So you really had to figure out a way of being taught. And we were very fortunate. We had some great clients, and one of them was local, and a man by the name of Greg Duxon, who owns General Aviation Services. He literally called and said, "Hey, I'll teach you guys how to buy and sell airplanes. If you want to drive up an hour and sit in my office every day, I'll teach you." And
wow.
That's what we did. So I drove up to Lake Zurich every day, and I think that was about a year and a half. And he said, "Okay, you're on your own." He's like, "I don't even want to see you guys anymore." I felt like it was going to be, like a really exciting career. And,
sure. You're selling private jets, man. Let's go.
Was, and I was young, and the market was flying, and I was really disassociated with the overall global economic environment back then. I learned how to buy and sell airplanes from Greg, and then I quickly figured out that I hated brokering aircraft. I loved the art of the deal. I hated having so many people in control of my destiny, and I had absolutely zero control outside of being a fast talker, right? Of coming up with some answer. And I hated that. I hated the fact that
that's true.
There's a lot of things you can't control, and every day you're starting over. And I hated that. I was like, I want to build something where, like, I don't have to get up every morning and worry about, where I'm going to find a client. And finding clients back then was, you were not doing SEO. You were not doing much more than print, advertising. And if you remember back in those days, print advertising in our industry was a fortune. They had you, over a barrel. There was nowhere else you could go. So it was industry rags, Rob Report, Wall Street Journal on Thursdays had a marketplace. You could buy like a little 3-line paragraph for $5,000. I'm telling you, it was really hard, really, really hard. That's why the Controller is what it is, because they started producing a magazine called The Controller. But I think that gave me a huge insight as to, like, what was I going to do to figure out a way, into the next, evolution, so to speak. And that's when I stumbled upon by accident the position market. So I had a client at Jesse. He sends me an email to an AOL email address that I'm telling you I checked once in a blue moon. That's how long ago this was. And so I dial in, and there's an email, and it said, "Hey, we own this position. It's a Challenger 300. We can't make our last payment. We want to liquidate it. We're willing to take a loss if somebody will step in and make the last payment." And I'm like, "Okay, how much do you want for it?" And they're like, they give me the number, and I'm like, "Well, this is just crazy." I was like, because unless I'm missing something, this plane is worth way more than what they want to sell it to me for. Even though it was in paper. And they're like, all you got to do is get permission from the manufacturer, and we'll tell you who to talk to. And I'm like, "You're making this way too easy. Like, what's the hook?" And they're like, "There isn't one. We just don't have the money." And so that's what happened. I talked to my dad. I said, "Hey, we got to go to the bank. We got to go borrow $18 million. And he's like, "You want to do what?" I said, "I want to borrow $18 million. I want to buy the plane." I said, "We'll take delivery of it. We'll sell it." There was a 4-year backlog, So that's where, I figured that we would be able to get rid of it and make some good money. And that's exactly what happened. It took me 60 days to sell the airplane. That turned into 27 positions that I bought and sold over a 4-year period. And
Interesting.
yeah, and so that's really what I did. So 2008 comes along, and obviously the rest is history, so to speak. I had to really reinvent the wheel, because the financing dried up with the Great Recession, and nobody wanted positions anymore, and the values dropped 50 cents on the dollar overnight. It was a disaster. So that took
Wow.
me 2 or 3 years to get out, in terms of workouts and dealing with all the
Wow.
all the crap that was left over from the fallout. But what wound up happening throughout that process is that I was appraising a lot of airplanes. I was appraising them for the bank, and I was not even charging them for it. I didn't realize that there was a business, and they just kept calling me and sending me stuff, and I'm running numbers all day. And I vividly remember looking at my dad, and I said, if I could just do this is what I want to do. I just want to run numbers. I'll tell you what it's worth. You go get rid of it. I don't want to deal with, I just don't want to
Yeah.
deal with the personality conflicts and the complexities and the negotiations and the cutthroat, I'll throw your mother under a bus to get the deal done. I'm not like that. I'm too nice to be in that arena. I can't just be mean to somebody to win a deal. And I'm not
I
going to
know,
call,
right? That boggles my mind sometimes that actually it works. I'm like, come
it's
on.
insane how
Are we
aggressive.
better than that?
It's in a very aggressive, nasty environment. And what's crazy is that the end buyer rarely ever sees that side of these transactions, because there's handlers involved. But
Mm-hmm.
they're disassociated with most of it. But yeah, the monkey business and the really trying to discredit somebody or steal the deal, or
Gosh.
it's just like, come on, I don't want to do this. Long story short, he made a phone call to the people that own VREF. They decided that they didn't want to maintain management or ownership of the company any longer, and I cut a deal with them and I bought it.
So looking at that, from the buyer's perspective, from when people are getting into aviation, I mean, obviously cars, we've got Kelly Blue Book,
Right.
and that plays a role in purchasing. So what's kind of the lay of the land right now when it comes to resources that provide valuation similar to a KBB for buyers? I mean, obviously we have VREF,
Right.
and not if you want to
So
name
yeah,
competitors, you can, but like, what's the lay of the land?
no, I mean, there's only two of us. So there's Aircraft Blue Book and there's VREF. We're much different companies. We have much different structures. We're different in terms of how we go about our business. And we're much different when it comes to the data sets. So
No.
VREF is the AOPA partner. And I think that pre-existed my taking over the company, but obviously it's something that I think is very important, because
Mm-hmm.
we really do have a ton of volume. People that they're flabbergasted when I give them the numbers. So we do about 20,000 valuations a month. We have about 700,000 active subscribers using our platform. There's usually 100 people, just direct subscribers of VREF, logged in every second of the day, 24/7. We track almost 800 aircraft models, several hundred million serial numbers. Like, seriously, it's absolutely crazy. I was like trying to have people add up all the serial numbers. It's just nuts. And we do a couple thousand appraisals a year, like true USPAP compliant desktop appraisals for financing, estate planning. I mean, that's like, and then all that data gets fit into our database, right? So every time there's a sale, it gets reported to us.
Hmm.
And we get about 1,000 reported transactions every 30 days, right? So every
Wow.
business jet gets reported. Not nearly every piston, but certainly enough piston aircraft that we know what's going on. And then through my work and through our other appraisers' work, we have our hands, in the market every day. And that is something that nobody else can claim or say that they can do, because I think that's what separates the accuracy from guesswork, because we really are in the market every day, right? And we don't have anything else that we do. We don't buy and sell anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're as ethic as the day is long, right? We maintain a third party, independent, unbiased opinion on every single asset. And that's why the banks trust us and rely
Mm-hmm.
on us. And that's why the brokerage community and the buying community have gotten behind this whole transparency, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
they have access to the same sets of data. We don't have one set for
Mm-hmm.
one group and another for somebody else. So that
So
levels the playing field.
So one of the things that I talk about a lot is the inefficiency of aviation, and that being, where does data come from? unless you have
Right.
intimate knowledge of the deals. And even if you're involved in a deal, there's usually a non-disclosure to some extent. So where
Right.
does that data come from? And how do you know that your data is accurate so that you can appropriately assign a value to the market
I
in
mean,
general?
that's a great question. So initially, all the data comes direct from the manufacturer. So when the
Oh, okay.
aircraft is delivered new, right, the manufacturer gives us a data set. And actually, just this past week, I probably got updates from a half dozen manufacturers because this is the
Gotcha.
time of year when we do that. So we're loading in all the 2023 aircraft right now. So that's
Mm,
the first step in me verifying that it's real, is that it came from them. And
right.
then from that point going forward, right, we track it. And so usually what happens is and it happens more often in the business jet world than anywhere else. And I also find this fascinating, but we'll get the same serial number reported by the seller, by the buyer, by the finance company. Sometimes we're even the appraiser of record. So like we have the same airplane being reported by different people. Sometimes the numbers are the same and sometimes they're not. And when they're not, that's when you got to be smart enough to go, well, something's going on here. So we can't rely on it. So it goes.
Mm, interesting.
Right. So
So we
outline data, that's what we do. We get rid of it because you can't average things out based on a one-off. That would be
but
unfair to the rest of the community.
when are the buyers and sellers and financing company reporting that? Like I,
So
I understand
they
like with
report it
escrow they could
daily.
do it,
Well,
but
no, I mean,
like
they
like
literally send us an email.
oh, so like if okay, and
It's-
now are these like what's like the age range of these jets that you're talking about? Because I'm looking at from the pre-owned world from the 70s through the early 2000s. Like I don't
Right.
know that buyers are like calling up VREF and be like, hey, by the way, I bought a jet for X amount of
They
dollars.
do. Believe
Oh,
believe it or
cool.
not, they
That's
do.
cool. Okay.
Yeah, so we get I don't know. When we prompt for it, and we prompt for it every month, we ask our community to share those transactions with us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we get about a 30 to 40% response rate. I mean,
Hmm.
and we also get every transaction direct from the FAA, right? So we get the FAA CDs, which is now being digitized, right? So we get the digital transaction reports every day. And
Mm-hmm.
so that also helps because we know what's closing.
On those FAA reports, though, is it like real estate where the actual sales price is given
No,
to the FAA and stuff, or that you
no,
have to?
there's
Okay.
no sales number. Confidentiality is a big part of this relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't resell the transactions, even though I'm sure there's a lot of people that would want to buy them from us. We don't sell the comps.
Here's a question. When
Yeah.
if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at, okay, how much is this? I'm looking to buy a plane. How much is this plane worth? And I look up the VREF, and the VREF says it's worth $500,000. Is VREF gospel?
So VREF is very accurate. I think margin of error, I mean, it's usually for me when I run numbers about 3%, which to me is
Oh, okay.
very
Yeah,
acceptable.
that's very accurate.
Um,
Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of errors that I see are user induced, meaning they don't have the experience to value the equipment. They're doing the best they can, but they're either missing high dollar items or they're deducting too much or they're not adjusting for things because they don't have the experience. And I'll tell you what's
Mm-hmm.
real subjective: condition. And forget piston aircraft. I mean, because
Right,
you're not
right. Yeah.
moving
Let's
the
talk about
meter,
jets.
right? But
Yeah.
if it's $100,000 airplane and you don't think it's got new paint, I mean, you just dinged it 20 grand, you're going to get the call about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in that case, it's 20% of the value. On a business jet, gets very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Maintenance, subjective. Um, Pedigree, subjective. Condition is subjective, right? And we all have opinions. And that's why the famous line is, if you put 10 appraisers in a room, you're going to get 10 different,
Right.
numbers,
Yeah.
because we all look at it a little differently. We're human. But I
Yeah.
think that what separates those that know the equipment, I didn't say know what they're doing, but know the equipment, and I think, again, that's really important. If we go to a different industry, and let's talk about music. I'm a big musician. I love guitars. I
Oh,
would
cool.
never give a guitar to an art appraiser to tell me what it's worth, even if it's vintage, because they don't know anything about guitars. They
Mm,
might know provenance. They might know that, some things about the history of the manufacturer, but you got to use a screwdriver, and get the right screwdriver to screw in a screw. You're not going to use a hammer. And so I think people don't ask enough questions, and they certainly don't ask the appraiser for their qualifications. And I see a lot of people that appraise equipment that know nothing about the equipment that they're appraising, or they've never been on board the airplane. They've never seen
Mm,
it in real life. How can you? It's like, I mean, the number one rule, right? I mean, you got to know what it is
gotta
before
put
you
your
tell
hands on it.
somebody what it's worth, right? And so that's the difference, is they don't have the experience to be able to separate, and we're talking on a vintage long range aircraft, an interior refurbishment could be well over $1 million. You get that
Hmm.
wrong on a $10 million airplane, right? I mean, that's the problem.
So what do you advise buyers to do when the VREF doesn't match the asking price? Obviously, with the last year or so of the market,
Market's been
prices
crazy.
prices
Yeah.
were all over the
And we
place. They're
lag,
coming back
right?
down.
So I think it's really important. People need to know that we don't make the market. And that's like,
Oh,
it's always a tug of war. And I think you have a
that's
tendency to
interesting.
be in a position, right, where you can do something to affect the market, but that's why we report in the rears. People always say
Ah,
VREF lags. Well,
yeah,
yes, that's by intent. I'm not going to take responsibility to create the numbers for the market to go trade on. I mean, that's insane. So that's why we report, and what I do is I report 30 days before the end of the quarter, which then gives all the financial institutions and the manufacturers to adjust their numbers before they're required to for compliance and regulatory, right? So
interesting.
all the assessors, the IRS, everybody uses VREF. And so that's why we
Right.
publish 30 days before the end of the quarter. We don't report what's going to happen. We report what just did. And so
Mm,
there's always going to be a lag in a hot market,
mm.
especially if inventory is real tight. But in a normal market environment, and really, I don't know, that's such a silly word today with normal. In a pre-COVID normal environment where you had 6-8% aircraft availability,
Right,
so 5
right,
to
right.
10%, 5 to 15%, that's really where you want to see.
Hmm.
If the number goes above that in terms of the availability on the open market versus the total fleet size, right? And then part of that too is you have to realize what the attrition rate is for that fleet every year. And not all fleets have the same attrition rate, meaning how many are coming out of service due to
Right.
mishap or maintenance. That's how you do proper forecasting. I mean, you got to know,
Hmm.
how many, older Challenger 601s are going to go to the scrapyard? How many Falcon 50s are going to go to the scrapyard? How many did? And so as that pool shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, all of these things are a much bigger deal.
What role does an appraisal play in a pre-buy? And how would you advise them? So most of the people, watching, they're looking for their first jet. Could be
Right.
500,000, like a Citation. Could be all the way up to maybe 8 million. They want to get a mid-size or heavy jet to put on a charter. What role does the appraisal play? Is the book, the VREF, is that like enough, or do you need to send out an appraiser before you make an offer?
So what I tell people all the time is like, let us be your tire kicker, right? So you can certainly subscribe and you can run numbers all day long and do proper research without really investing a whole lot of money or time for that matter. I
Hmm.
mean, you should be able to do a full-blown valuation report in 15 to 20 minutes. And I think, if you're really good and know the market really well, you could probably shave half that. But, do the tire kicking. Don't rely on us to tell you about mechanical issues. Don't rely on us to tell you about airworthiness. And don't rely on us to tell you about the transaction and whether or not there's a lien or a clouded title.
Right,
Rely
right.
on us to negotiate to purchase. And so with that, you got to realize what type of market environment you're in. And so when numbers don't necessarily align, it's either because the market's really hot and people have pie in the sky asking prices, or you made a mistake. And I find that it's usually that a mistake was made. Yeah, I don't think that there's any like killer deals anymore, but you can certainly do better if you're willing to go to a class of aircraft that isn't popular. This is a popularity contest, right? So value and
Interesting.
popularity go hand in hand. The more popular an airplane is, the easier it is to sell. The more STCs, the more support, the more stuff you can throw in it. People love them, and the flip side is the less there is of something, the harder it is to find somebody that's willing to buy it because you don't know a whole lot. That's also where
Hmm.
we come. We know stuff about aircraft that you've never even heard of.
I'd love to pull back the curtain a little bit on maybe this idea of like buyer beware, or just
Right.
this idea of transparency that, based on your experience, what are maybe one or two situations that you would recommend buyers be aware of that maybe they haven't thought about? Because like you said, aviation is kind of the wild, wild west, at some times. And, making sure that you have a team that like, and trust, is really important. But what are maybe some things people should look out for, or something that they haven't? I mean, even we can talk about this idea of a back to back, because that might be something
Sure.
that is a foreign concept to most people watching.
Yeah, so and a back-to-back is a great example because I find that it opens up a lot of opportunity to think for things to go badly.
Hmm.
Basically a back-to-back means that the intermediary, or in this example, the broker, takes a position of ownership of the aircraft before the buyer owns it. Now,
Hmm.
so he has stepped in between the buyer and the seller. He
Hmm.
negotiates a purchase price from the seller, negotiates a sales price with the buyer, scrapes the money off the middle, and allows the airplane to close through escrow.
Hmm.
So the proper way to do it, the legal way to do it, the way that won't get you in a lot of hot water, in civil court, is to tell the buyer that you are taking a position and you're doing a back to back. Now, people are going to say, well, he's never going to agree to it. Well, I mean, I don't think that that's true at all. I see back to backs that go through that way every day. And the reason is that the broker is bringing something to the table, whether it's trust, organizational skills, know-how, knowledge, expertise, all of the above. And he's entitled to forego his commission in lieu of whatever he can make negotiating the difference.
Hmm.
Now, the double dip is where you find that there's no tolerance, even if there's transparency. And what I mean by that is that the broker's already negotiated to get a commission from the buyer. And then
Hmm.
that's not good enough. So now he's going to go and do a back to back, buy the airplane and resell it and collect a commission. I
Hmm.
don't think we have to be older than 6 years old to know that that's not right. Um,
Hmm.
whether it's illegal or not, that's not my position. It's unethical. And I think it sours people's taste in their mouth, and it removes people as potential clients from our industry. That's what shrinks our
Hmm.
industry, that kind of behavior. But
Hmm.
if it's done right, I think there's nothing wrong with it. And I actually think it plays a vital role in, in trade, because there's always times when a seller needs to sell and a buyer's not ready to buy, and there's an opportunity. And I think, why not? Now, here's the difference. If you're the buyer, I wouldn't be able to use your money if I'm the broker, right? I should have my own money to put down as the deposit. If I'm willing
That's
to buy
true. In
that
a back
aircraft,
to back,
right? So
sometimes there's,
in
yeah.
a back to back, what happens most of the time? The broker, whoever's doing the back to back, they use the buyer's money as a
They
deposit
use the
and
bar.
they ask them to
Yeah.
reassign it, right? Now that's a big, big, big no-no. I mean, that's when you basically should just say, whatever goes bad, I just got to own up to it. If you use your own money and your own money's at risk, again, I mean, I think that that's like the best way to go about it. And the
Hmm.
people I know that do back to backs regularly, that's exactly what they do. They put their own money up in deposit. They go and negotiate. Good example. Bank has an airplane coming off a lease. The bank doesn't want to go through remarketing. They make a couple phone calls to people that they know that like to buy that kind of equipment. Guy puts down a deposit. He goes through the motions like he's going to buy it. He finds somebody else to step in his shoes before he has to write a check. What's wrong with that?
Right.
Stuff is sold like that every day.
Hmm.
But what's the difference? The buyer is doing business with whoever rightfully owns it.
Hmm.
KYC, know your customer, the ability for people to do, to trace where all this money's coming from, whether
Hmm.
it's through money laundering or crypto or just unscrupulous bad behavior. Like, that's what we have to audit. That's why
Hmm.
there's people looking over these transactions now. Yeah, transparency is a tough pill to swallow. I mean, yeah, it's usually going to cost you money, but it should gain you a whole lot of respect, a lot of longevity, right? And more repeat business.
That
Um,
that was fantastic, explanation, and I think that's something that is not talked about because it's very tempting, from the broker's world.
of
It's
course,
very
it's a
tempting
carrot that's
to
dangled every day. You already have both
every day.
parties in your hand,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, and if you get the great idea that you want to squeeze blood from a turnip, sure. I mean, I've seen everything. So there's a couple red flags to be aware of. Large aircraft with international participants. that's when you know that the field is basically going to be set for something like this. You just got to protect yourself. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine. You go
Sure.
buy a $50 million airplane, you think it's hard to hide five? I mean, that
Hmm.
nobody, and so
And it comes down to transparency. As long as everybody knows, because there should be an expectation that everyone involved in this transaction is getting compensated, is getting paid in some way, shape, or form.
absolutely. That's another great example because if you haven't been in the industry long enough and somebody says, go find me an airplane, it's like, oh my God, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean I need a contract? I trust you, right? Handshake deal. I mean, I can give a couple pieces of advice to both sides. So if you're a broker, one of the things you really want to do is make sure that it's exclusive. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and you're wasting your
Yep.
money. I
Yep.
also think that if you're going to be brokering an airplane and you're new to that market or you don't have a list of potential buyers, you got to figure out, what that marketing budget's going to really need to look like. And you either have to ask for the retainer, which is a tough thing to ask for, or you front the money, but you have to have that kind of conversation with your customers so that
Hmm.
you have the ability to recapture some of it.
Hmm.
And that will alleviate a lot of the needs to want to go back to the trough for more and more and more when the deal's already been cut. But if you're a
Hmm.
buyer, the flip side is that the broker is not entitled to any of these afterlife clauses. Like if you buy or sell or lease anything for 90 days after the termination, don't.
Really?
Oh yeah, I see it every day. Don't
Oh,
agree to that.
weird.
Yeah, if you're a buyer and you're dealing with a broker, hire a broker for a specific period of time and then it drops dead. That's it. The best piece of advice I can give a buyer, is really make sure that the broker has a contract because these handshake deals, that's what really bites everybody in the butt at the end of the day, and I'll see buyers do it all. They're nice guys. You want to do business with them. They're looking for, a kinger or whatever. I mean, it's harmless. But then you got 50 guys that have all worked their tail off for this guy, and they're all entitled to something. It's his fault, if you ask me. So the
Mm.
buyer really needs, pick one, hire them. Don't pick
Hmm.
five and put them up against each other. That's the worst thing in the world. What
Well,
happened
it
to me?
hurts.
It does. It
Yeah.
happened to me all the time. What do you mean there's somebody else working for you? Why did you bother?
Hmm. And it hurts the value because then all of a sudden, if there's King Airs on the market, let's say, and that one seller is getting
Oh
calls
my
from five
God.
different people, it's like,
Well,
wow, five guys like my plane. It must be
that's
worth a lot. And now
exactly
this,
it.
now the buyer's screwed.
That's exactly it. And you'll find too that it's never a buyer for like a routine airplane that there's 2,000 of, right? It's always something that's super special. I want a 13 and a half passenger King Air B200 that was made in, with red paint. It's like there's one out there, he knows it. And now all these guys call him, and this guy's going home at night and he's like, can you believe how many people want to buy my airplane? I mean, I actually know a guy who raised his price because he thought that there were so many people that wanted to buy his airplane. And it turned
Mhm.
out it was exactly this. It was a bunch of brokers all working for the same guy. Nobody knew. The guy,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. I
yeah,
believe it. I
yeah,
believe it.
yep. He's like, this is great. I'm raising my number. And this is why you need a broker. Honestly, I mean, buyers call me a lot and they're like, should I hire a broker? And it's like, do you have the patience? Do you have the ability, the patience, and the skill set to contact these people, get them to answer the phone, and then get the information you need out of them in a way that you can actually do something with it? And I think that, especially if you're selling a plane, oh my God, on a piston side, you could get 200 phone calls in a day, plus another 50 emails, plus all the stuff on Facebook. And you're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Well, that's why you get a broker. So you
Yeah.
don't hang up on people. You're not rude to everybody. And I mean, you got to keep in mind what you're trying to accomplish here. So you get more
Hmm.
bees with honey. You got to be overly nice to people. And when they ask you for logbooks and clear pictures, send them that. You know, Step one, like put together a proper spec sheet. I mean, don't make people guess and then send you more work to do. You're bringing it upon yourself. But that's
Hmm.
what a broker brings to the table. That's why when someone says, should I hire a broker? Absolutely. But you got to make sure that that broker then, should be intimate in that market, should have a laundry list of buyers, as well as a laundry list of potential issues with the plane that he or she should already be well aware of. Because if you've
Hmm.
done, a half dozen Piper Cherokees, they all are going to be basically, the same thing at that point. Pre-buy is not to determine value, it's to determine airworthiness. So
It's a great point.
again, right, you want to bring an airplane to somebody that's never seen the airplane before, that isn't already maintaining it. You want them to give you an independent opinion as to what its airworthiness and condition is. And then that gives you a second round
Hmm.
of negotiating with the seller. Now, in a perfect situation, there's nothing wrong and you close, but in a really
Right.
horrific situation, you find all sorts of stuff wrong.
I always tell people pre-buy, like you said, not to provide value. It's to know what you're getting into. Because I think a lot of guys come to the table and they expect a pre-buy to, to show that the plane's perfect. It's like,
Right. Like
no,
it's
there's gonna be something wrong with it. You just
yeah.
got to know what you're getting into.
Most people think it's like going to BMW and having them give you like a certified pre-owned sheet. Like, we went through every, and it's just not how it works. Nobody wants to tear apart an airplane to put it back together again to deal with all those expenses. So they look for things that are easy to look for and things that are commonly found. And I have a really, really good friend who's been in aviation for a long time. And he said to me one day, he's like, pre-buys are just like a level of comfort. He's like, honestly, he's like, the thing could break tomorrow after a pre-buy. He's like, it's a snapshot in time. He's like, you just got
Thank
to accept
you.
the fact that,
Thank you.
that's what you're dealing with here. You're comfortable at that moment, but even a new airplane can be squawked the very
Yes.
same day.
Yeah.
So,
I've had planes come fresh out of, phase 1 through 5 inspections. And,
oh yeah,
all of a sudden the pressure ratio is all jacked up the next
yep,
time they take it after delivery. You're like, what
yep.
the heck?
And it's not there's no such thing as perfect. I gave up on that word a long time ago, being in aviation. Now
No,
I
it's
hold myself like
clean. It's
super clean.
clean.
It's clean. Yeah, it's got a, yeah. Well, I've seen clean airplanes too that are pigs, with lipstick. I mean, it's just it's all relative. I mean, honestly, that's why I say it's popularity.
I love that.
You don't want to buy a plane that nobody else wants. You don't want to sell a plane that nobody else wants. And you don't want to go to the vendor market and try and support a plane that nobody else wants. Yeah, I do believe, especially aviators in general, we're very I don't know, fantasy driven maybe is the best.
Nostalgic. Yeah.
Yeah, we love that kind of stuff. We love the smell, we love the sound, we love the noise. Fuel to us smells good. It's not a
That
top.
was a change for me. That's funny you mentioned
uh,
that because when I first started doing lessons when I was like 16, I quit after 3 lessons because I couldn't take the smell of the fuel. It gave me
And
headaches.
now
And now after being a pilot for, 100 hours, I'm like,
it makes you
yeah,
comfortable, right?
exactly. Because it
Yeah.
reminds you of all the stuff that
I
you're doing in
I
the air.
love the smell of like a 70s cabin after you open the door.
Yeah, right?
I love it. I don't know what it is about the vinyl. It's like some sort of gas or something that comes off of all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't it reminds me of a friend's car from high school, that smell, every time.
Mhm.
It's the same smell. I'm just like, wow, that's so crazy how that works.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find out more information about VREF or anything you want, any direction you want to point people in now?
Yeah,
Please let us
I'm
know.
easy to find. So you can find us through vref.com. You can find us through AOPA. They have a landing page for us. You can call me directly. It's 844-303-VREF. Send me
Cool.
an email, jason@vref.com. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I really appreciate the time, the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out theultimatejetguide.com.